Now we come to the portion of the service before we get into the Bible study that we talk about some end-time news and prophecy update as we do each week. And again, we want to welcome the online church and subscribers around the world, and thank you for joining with us and partnering with us. We always talk about the signs of the times and what's happening as it relates to Bible prophecy, or you just look at the news and how it all comes to light, especially as you look through Matthew 24 and 2 Timothy chapter 3. So that's our filter grid. There's so much that is going on a daily and weekly basis. And as we mentioned this past week, there was the G20 summit that took place in Turkey. And of course, they're going to talk about the economic issues and the refugee issues and global terrorism. But an interesting comment that Vladimir Putin said in his intelligence, Russian intelligence data, said that Islamic State financing is coming from close to 40 different countries. Some of them are part of the G20. So not only do you have the problem of terrorism, but you have these other corrupt countries that are financing this terrorism. The problem's not going to get any better by doing that. And what took place the previous week, again, last Friday with Paris, that's just the tip of the iceberg. This is part of the refugee problem. Not saying that every refugee's this, but you have these pocket full of terrorists that are coming in, which is part of what Islam teaches. But they're coming in thousands by the thousands, flooding in throughout Europe, coming in through Turkey. Turkey's on the border next to Syria. So this is their entryway in, and then they make their way throughout Europe, and then they're going to make their way throughout the rest of the world. Belgium is in lockdown right now because there's a lot more terrorist activity that's going on. Not like what took place in Paris, but they're seeing all these signs. Even in Germany, they're supposed to have a big soccer game, and they closed down the stadium because of a bomb threat. But you start to see how they're trying to go through the different borders. Even this report that came out of Fox News on Thursday, and it had the title, Testing the Gates. And here's where the Syrians nabbed at the south border next to Arizona at arrests stoke terror fears. So they're approaching the borders in Texas and Arizona. They grabbed them. They got hold of them. Even on Tuesday, there's a group of 5 Syrians that went in through Honduras, and they were captured there. They're heading their way to making their way to the U.S. with stolen or doctored Greek passports. And later, they said that these men were college students fleeing the war. They may have been, but here's the thing that you're starting to see. These guys could be the guinea pigs to try to find the way, the entry point, the easiest access to make their way into the United States. As we know, ISIS has been putting out tons of videos of how they're going to attack and where they're going to attack in New York and Washington and other places like that. And of course, Obama is wanting to bring in more Syrian refugees, and within that, you're going to have a handful of terrorists that are going to come in through that particular entryway. But he goes on to say in the summit that he just did, and this came out of the Washington Times on Thursday, where he makes this statement where he says the Syrian refugees are no bigger threat to U.S. than tourists. Okay? And so he says that overwhelming numbers of the Syrians who are applying for entry into the United States are children, women, and families are themselves victims of terrorism. And this is how some of them have came in. They hire these kids to come along to look like a family as well. Now, some of them are legit families because we're not throwing everything out, but this is the way they do it. Once they get into the country, they dismiss them and they go to their battlefield. And so he says that they're already subject to rigorous vetting by the U.S. security officials. Really? But the idea, this is the interesting thing that he said on this, that somehow they pose more of a significant threat than the tourists who pour into the United States every single day just doesn't jive with reality. He also said that my expectations after the initial spasm of rhetoric that people will settle down and take a look at the facts, and we'll be able to proceed. Well, someone who's not really jiving with reality is this current administration. Just even the week ago, the same day when the attack happened in Paris, he said earlier that day, ISIS is contained. So who's not with reality? And in the wake of the massacre, again, the French president declared it's an act of war. But as you see, each week, this current administration, this current president is declaring war on the American people by his policies, by his recklessness, by his weakness, and how he leads. And he calls anyone who opposes this increase in the Muslim migration, and namely he's having a go at the GOP, the Republican Party, as he calls them shameful. So it's shameful to disagree with him or disagree with this influx, because what's taken place in Europe is going to take place in Australia, it's going to take place in the United States, and take place in Canada and other countries. It's not going to be any different. And so he says, and here's the other thing that's happened, is that he's also refused Christians seeking refugee. He'll allow the Muslims to come in, but he won't allow the Christians to flee and get into those countries as well. And again, ISIS has vowed to attack and issued many warnings of the coming attacks in New York City, Times Square, and again, Washington. And of course, you've heard the report how he calls them the junior varsity team. Well, this junior varsity team, ISIS, is shaking the world. They're doing a pretty good job when it comes down to it. The American people are supposed to trust him to vet the migrants coming in, the refugees. And if you even look at his administration, they cleaned up their counterterrorism material, not to mention Islam in it, or jihad in the connections with terrorism. But he's going to vet for these guys. Maybe he's fine to let these Muslims in that were migrants that were getting away from Libya, going into Italy. And the Italian police had this, and there was a report that came out of the Associated Press. On their way there, they threw out 12 fellow passengers overboard, killing them. Who were these guys? These 12 people? They were Christians. Not to mention, even on the attacks on Paris that Friday, President Obama never mentioned that was Islam, even though ISIS declared responsibility for the attack. But he'll never mention it was Islam that did it. And then kind of on another, you see how far he goes with not wanting to name Islam, but now even within the administration, according to their Veteran Affairs, you can't even say Merry Christmas. They had this thing that went on, you can't have a Christmas tree, you can't say Merry Christmas, and now because of the pressure, they said now they can have a Christmas tree, but you can't have anything to do with Merry Christmas or any of those sort of decoration or displays to promote any religion. And so you're starting to see how far this administration has gone. Even the candidate Hillary Clinton, she had a statement this week saying Muslims are peaceful and tolerant, have nothing to do whatsoever with terrorism. I don't know what planet she's living in, but you look at every attack, every terrorism had Muslims at the root of it. What's going on in Mali right now. You see that's part of Al-Qaeda as well, and that's part of Islam. But she goes on to say, by blaming radical Islamic terrorism for these vicious attacks in Paris is just a distraction. Affiliating them with a religion gives these criminals, these murderers, more standing than they deserve. No, it isn't. It's calling it for what it is when it comes down to it. Islam is the root of all this. It's all part of their caliphate agenda to take over the world. That is part of the Islamic teaching. Also, and this was interesting because it came out of Huntington Beach, where I was from, and just a school around the corner from our church there. But there's this 7th grade teacher that decided to introduce this fight song that introduces them to Islam. And her supposedly agenda from the school board mentions that she wanted the students to learn Islam through this song. The word got out, and there's Islamic Relations in Anaheim, and he made this statement. He said, especially with the recent attacks that ISIS has been doing, knowing the potential Islamophobic backlash that might come about, what was this teacher's intention? So there's already a lot of tensions that's going on, and now this teacher deviated from what the school agenda was supposed to be, and she said, hey, let's try this song, and it, of course, backfired. But you start to see this is something that's been going on in a lot of school classrooms around the United States, specifically that I'm aware of, that this indoctrination with Islam. We know that indoctrination has been happening, especially in Palestine. A Palestinian 2-year-old who made his father very proud, and this came out of the report on Friday, when he requested a machine gun to defeat Israel and the Zionists. So again, the proud father, he was overjoyed by hearing his son's request to do this. And it came in the form of a Palestinian songs about killing the Zionists. And here's part of the lyrics of that, where it says, "Daddy, give me a present, a machine gun and a rifle. When I'm a big boy, I will join the Liberation Army, the army of Hamas, which has taught us how to defend our homeland. Our homeland is precious, precious. We are victorious, victorious over America and Israel." So don't tell me Islam is a peaceful religion. And by the way, there was a report that came out today, I think it was today, correct? About Iran. They have this mock-up of the Temple Mount, and they have thousands of soldiers marching up to see if they can overtake the Temple Mount. So this is a peaceful religion that they're trying to get the world to believe, but yet you see their rhetoric day in, day out, and how they want to destroy America and Israel. And then finally, there's this report that came out earlier this year, and it's really shocking to see the phases of this terrorism 7-step program to establish a caliphate, and they're right on target to meeting all their demands and what they're doing. And as we're speaking, it's a 20-year plan. We're 5 years to go. We're on stage 5 right now. So again, here's the first phase, and this happened from 2000 to 2003. And this first phase is known as the awakening. 9/11 happened. That was a big awakening there. It was where the provoked the U.S. to declare war on Islamic world by thereby awakening Muslims. So the first phase was judged by the strategist and mastermind behind Al-Qaeda, was very successful. The battlefield opened up, and the Americans and their allies became closer targets. The second phase is called opening eyes. So here's the terrorists hope to make the Western conspiracy aware of the Islamic community. And this phase, which Al-Qaeda developed into a movement, and the network recruited young men during this period of time. So as you think back in this period of time, you're starting to see, yes, this is all that happened. And these things were told way before it was going to happen. And so Iraq became the center of the global operations. An army was set up there and established other Arabic states. Phase 3 is described the arising and standing up. And this took place from 2000 to 2010. And the focus was on Syria, and predicted by the man that wrote this particular article. And the fighting forces were prepared and are in Iraq. Attacks in Turkey, if you remember back then. Even other attacks that were happening in Israel. Al-Qaeda's mastermind hoped the attacks on Israel would help the terrorist group become more recognized as an organization. The fourth phase, which is 2010 to 2013, brings about the collapse of the hate of the Arabic governments. What took place during that time? The fall of Egypt, right? Libya, Tanzania, and Syria, which is in the progress right now. So the creeping loss of these regimes' power will lead to steady growth and the strength of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So the same attacks at this time will be carried out against oil suppliers, and the U.S. economy would be targeted using cyber terrorism. The fifth phase, which we're kind of in the middle at this point right now, this is where the caliphate was declared. Remember last year and even this year, this whole caliphate and that became known. So this is between 2013 to 2016, which is next year. So the Western influence of the Islamic world will be so reduced and Israel so weakened that the resistance will not be feared. And so the Al-Qaeda hopes by then the Islamic State will be able to bring in a new world order. That's part of their agenda. So the West won't be able to resist this new world order, possibly because of the economic collapse, the political instability, and a combination of those things. And we'd also have to say the fake front of this whole climate change, which is all about government control and pushing the rules and regulations upon people, and which would create a whole new world order. So they're using climate change to put fear within people. But that's the elitists and the New World Order. The Phase 6, 2016 to 2018, is a period what they call total confrontation. And it hopes to initiate through its establishment of this Islamic super state a world war unlike anything that we've ever seen. Why do you think they're putting the migrants and refugees in these countries around the world? Partly is probably because of this whole total confrontation. The caliphate will be declared and the Islamic army will go to war with non-believers. So anyone who's not a Muslim is a non-believer. And they're also saying that because some of this conflict will be nuclear, there's a report that came out on Thursday out of Yahoo News saying that ISIS is determined to produce chemical war weapons. So they're aggressively pursuing chemical weapons as we speak. They're developing these things in Iraq and Syria and other parts in that region. The seventh and final phase is called definitive victory, and it accomplished because the world will be weary of the war and will succumb to the sheer magnitude of 1.5 billion Muslims. So, meanwhile, the Muslim Brotherhood wrote a parallel plan in the 90s, okay, and it was later captured. And details of how to eliminate and destroy Western civilization from within. Notice how their plan has steadily pushing about this. Why is so many governments afraid of the Muslims? And so they bow down and give them what they want. Far-fetched? Well, you look at what happened with the Obama administration. They have 6 Muslim brotherhoods in their administration as part of their advisors. It's not far-fetched to see this happening. In the meantime, U.S. continues to negotiate with Iran about nuclear weapons. So the terrorist attacks are not merely conducted arbitrarily. They have the view of the big picture in mind. Behind every terrorist attack and battle looms the overall strategy, as we just mentioned. And so the Arab nations that are not in support of this are part of going to be attacked as well and sought for destruction. So radical Islam will continue to threaten the world as long as there are terrorists to attack us. And that's why one of the most important strategy for us as believers is to be praying, to be aware of these things. It's a spiritual battle because it's demonic. It's Satan-filled when these guys do that. And there's reports when people are doing their suicide missions, you see the demonic upon these people's eyes and what they're doing. And so... So we're starting to see more of these things developing around the world, and it's part of the Islamic agenda. And they need Christ. We need to pray for them to receive Christ. Pray for them to see visions of Jesus. That's where so many Muslims are coming to faith. In fact, more Muslims are coming to faith in Iran in those last several years since Khomeini came into power than the previous 1,400 years. So we're starting to see amazing things happen in these Islamic countries as well. So we need to be praying for that. Anyways, we need to stay alert, be prepared, be watchful for what's happening around the world and in our own backyard here. And most importantly, keep your eyes on Jesus and in His Word. Amen? And that concludes today's update.